Hey, how y'all doing? This is Reverend Dick. Check the description for links to the articles and also for links to social media. Now, today, I have a little news from Sweden for you. And this is kinda how the Swedish government prioritizes shit. Let me just check so that I did that right. Yeah, I did. I'm leaving that in, by the way. ISIS terrorist demands compensation from Sweden for missing his activity support. One of the first Swedish ISIS terrorists. Does he look Swedish to you? Do you see his blonde hair, blue eyes, and the clean-shaven look that you have come to associate with Swedes? That was just an aside. One of the first ISIS terrorists who was arrested by British authorities in 2014 but released in 2015. Now Berlang Gildo, as the man was previously called, is claiming damages from Sweden because the social insurance agency did not pay him his activity support when he was detained in the UK. Berlang Gildo was one of the first Swedish citizens to join ISIS in Syria. Several images of Gildo's abuse have been published on social media, which Gildo himself has provided. And this guy, he tortured people, he killed people, and the general shit that they did over there. And he posted about it proudly on his social media. In the pictures, Gildo has trampled on the dead Syrian soldiers, posed next to corpses, and humiliated Christians, according to the Evening Post. In September 2014, Gildo was arrested at Heathrow Airport in the United Kingdom and included in an investigation into terrorist offences. In June 2015, Gildo was released, partly because the jihadist groups he joined were supported by Britain, according to the Daily Mail. After this release, Gildo returned to Sweden, where he changed his name and address. Now Gildo is demanding more than 200,000 Swedish crowns, that's about $20,000, in compensation from the Swedish state. The reason is that his activity support from the social insurance agency was not paid when he was detained in the UK. Now, here's just an aside about how Sweden works. If you are away from employment for a long time, you get to register in a state-provided program where you are basically paid, I think it's like $30 to $50 a day, where you are ready and able to join the work market, but the working market has no use for you. And for this, we have introduced the social insurance agency. So yeah, this motherfucker probably never worked a day in his life here in Sweden, so he's also just been on the social insurance welfare bullshit. But this isn't where this entire line of thought stops. But I'll be getting to that later. Gildo also accuses Swedish Säpo, our security police, of having been implicated in Gildo being, in his opinion, wrongfully deprived of liberty. No one recognizes who ordered or decided on the detention, but Säpo cooperated with MI6 in England, Gildo writes in his claims for justice to the Chancellor. He claimed that the Swedish security police helped with information, but there is no evidence for that. Granted, they have talked to each other, but that does not mean that he was prosecuted on behalf of the Swedish state in the UK, says Magnus Ranstorp, political scientist and expert on terrorism, to the Evening Post. According to Ranstorp, Gildo should address his demands to the British state rather than the Swedish. At the same time, Ranstorp notes that the documented acts Gildo committed did not have any legal consequences. I would say that he is disgusting about what he has done down there on the pictures he posts on and in those contexts. That's why I wonder why they didn't start a preliminary investigation into war crimes in relation to what he did, says Ranstorp. In February this year, prosecutor Carolina Wislander said in SVT's Agenda that there were good opportunities to prosecute returning ISIS terrorists in case there is evidence. To the extent that we see that there is evidence, we in Sweden have very good conditions to prosecute these people, said Wislander. Now this is first of all full of shit, because Most people that return are just let loose, and they are invited to an optional chat with the Swedish security police. That's first of all. You don't even need to show up. They won't demand that you show up to speak with them or anything because it's voluntary. Secondly, many people in Sweden are very angry that this guy is suing because he didn't get his fucking welfare money during the time that he was detained in the UK. Thing is, why isn't he seeking damages for the time that he spent in Syria without being detained on a legal status in a foreign country? Well, because he got his fucking money. So Sweden has actively paid a fucking terrorist warring against the Syrian state, against the Kurdish people, against the Iraqi state, against the Yazidi people. And he's gotten paid by Swedish tax money. And this is, leads us to the Swedish Foreign Aid Program, SIDA, who stops aid after corruption scandal. Who's surprised? Who here is surprised at all? A development fund to improve the lives of poor people in Africa will have the assistance of Swedish SIDA stopped after it was revealed that the fund's managers raised their salaries and paid expensive air travel and membership with Swedish tax money. Not only that, in connection with this, in Norway, it has surfaced that allegedly all the Eritrean migrants there, who are technically on paper asylum seekers, partied with a bunch of Eritrean officials in Norway celebrating the anniversary, I think it was the 25th anniversary of the civil military duty in Eritrea. And these fucking Eritreans, they fled to Norway, were granted asylum so that they wouldn't have to serve in the Eritrean army during this conscription age that they do have. And now they party with the fucking guys to celebrate the conscription. So, yeah. Europe is a fucking mess. SIDA, the state authority that distributes Swedish aid, has stopped all payments to one of the authority's largest contributors, reports Aftonbladet. I don't know how to translate that. It is about the African Enterprise Challenge Fund, AECF, which, according to SIDA's website, aims to improve the lives of poor people in sub-Saharan Africa by stimulating small businesses. Last year, AECF received 114 Swedish crowns, that's 11.4 million American dollars, from SIDA. I'm sorry. But all the money has not been spent on improving the lives of poor Africans. According to a forensic audit ordered by SIDA about the organization, AECF has significantly increased its own salaries and introduced a new bonus system after signing an agreement with SIDA in November 2017, where SIDA pledged to donate a total of 400 million Swedish crowns, that's around $40 million US dollars, to AECF. Now, I just wonder, why the fuck are we supposed to give them that much money of our tax money that we could use to invest in schools and healthcare and the like within the nation? But then again, I'm considered crazy by my fellow Swedistani peers. According to the report, the CEO of the organization has a monthly salary of 245,000 Swedish crowns. In addition, received bonus of 440,000 Swedish crown in December last year. The report also shows that the tops of AECF regularly traveled in business class and received membership in exclusive clubs paid with the help of SIDA money. It is totally unacceptable, and you get very upset. Therefore, we have reacted as soon as we have received this information and frozen all payments. You have not kept the agreements you have had with us, says Hans Magnusson, head of SIDA's Africa department, to Aftonbladet. Why do we need that fucking guy to cost us money? In April, the authority chose to freeze payments to the fund, which for 2019 would have totaled 137 million Swedish crowns. However, no evidence of a law violation have been found in the report, and SIDA will therefore not report AECF to the police, whose CEO was fired in July. Whether and when disbursements to AECF will resume have not been decided. We have started a fairly intensive dialogue with AECF, where we have blamed these shortcomings and demanded that they implement changes, which they have done to some extent, but we are still not really satisfied, and we expect them to show a clear will to make these changes and correct these problems, says Hans Magnusson. Now, this is the way that Swedish politicians use our collective money to, which we are paid with in the belief that we are giving it to pay for our own healthcare, our own school system, our care of the elderly, infrastructure, train tracks, and all of the likes that are included in that. We have a bunch of shit that we are guaranteed in something that we call the societal contract. And not many things of these are kept at the moment. But these motherfuckers, they are trying to investigate if they can continue to just fucking burn money away on some fucking corrupt African organization that is not benefiting our people whatsoever. And this, of course, leads to a bunch of shit. Students risk being left without housing in cities who has a fast lane, and they translate it to sour cream for some fucking reason. But basically, it's a fast lane track for newly arrived migrants. It's just a weird Swedish expression that is botched completely with Google Translate. And now shit is not responding. Well, you're gonna have to wait with me. See, in Sweden, we use tax money to pay for the construction of housing every once in a while. We call it public use shit. I don't know how to translate that properly, but anyhow, we don't do that shit anymore. We don't really have municipal housing expenses, building apartments that are cheap for Swedish people anymore. And you're about to find out how this shit works for students. In 12 of Sweden's 33 student cities, students may have to stay without accommodation for at least half a year, according to Sweden's Unified Student Union, SFS, something that the Swedish state television was the first to report on. Instead, all 12 municipalities have a fast lane for municipal apartments for newly arrived migrants. Now, just students have to wait for over half a year, at the very least half a year, before receiving any sort of student accommodation, whereas newly arrived social welfare dependent migrants get a fast track to all municipal sort of accommodation that is available in these cities. SFS has made a survey of the housing situation for the students in 33 student cities in Sweden. 12 of the 33 are red listed, which means that it takes longer than one semester to get a student accommodation. All red listed municipalities, Gothenburg, Halmstad, Jönköping, Karlskrona, Linköping, Luleå, Lund, Skövde, Stockholm, Umeå, Uppsala, and Visby, Gotland, also have fast lanes for newly arrived migrants. Oh, and another thing that they also do through the Swedish Migration Board and the Social Welfare Board is that they bid between 150 to 300% of market values for the fees to rent an apartment on the private market in Sweden as well, which they of course use Swedish tax money for. So they are effectively using Swedish tax money to invest to make life harder for Swedish people. One reason the newly arrived migrants get around the housing queues is the housing law, which forces municipalities to best arrange the housing for the migrants first, which I just told you about. Matilda Strömberg, the chair of SFL, tells SVT that the situation is as bad as last year for the country's students. Many student unions around the country contact us and say that several students cannot start or have to cancel their education because they cannot find accommodation, she says. According to Housing Minister Per Bolund of the Environmental Party, which is MP, the situation is unacceptable. What he is supposed to do about the matter is unclear. It's unacceptable. That we have enough student housing is important for society so that we get the knowledge we need. You should not have to give up education because you do not have a place to live, he says to the Swedish state television morning studio. And this is the issue when you bring in more people than your country is able to handle with all the needs that, let's face it, mostly lowly educated to analphabetical migrants have to use when they arrive to a country that is dependent on high-skilled workers, as is the case in Sweden because we have modernized our market. In reality, of course, this is all a bunch of fucking lies, because these improvements in the professional market in Sweden can still be learned in about a week's work on location, whether it be serving people on restaurants, whether it be cooking shit in a fast food joint. They demand that you are educated for everything. They demand that you have a degree to be able to bartend on most Swedish bars as well, which is kind of fucking pathetic if you think about it. But yeah, this has been Reverend Dick. I hope y'all have a good one, and please stay tuned. Please like the video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to the channel, and most of all, please share. In the description, you will find a link to these fucking articles and also a link to my fucking social media. Now, hopefully I've scared away the boomers. This has been Reverend Dick, signing out.